I think there's some good news as of right now when it comes to Quant, and what is that? Not too long ago, Quant announced something that I think could be so special for its future. They posted on X and said how they were introducing Quant Fusion, the core infrastructure for digital asset interoperability. Now, before I get into this, I first want to explain kind of the roadmap that they do list because when it comes to the testnet, allegedly it's launching in weeks for all Quant Connect users. And also when it comes to the mainnet, it says launching with real value assets and staking support. So the way you take a look at it is that there's still ways to go here. I can't really evaluate it in full, but at least I can talk about what this thing is basically trying to do and why I think it's so special. Because, again, if we take a look at Quant Fusion, the core infrastructure for digital asset interoperability, why is this a big deal? It's because I think the key is interoperability. Now, what is that even, right? Let me explain. There's a lot of networks out there, a lot of blockchains, but because many of them are independent of one another, they cannot freely send data and value to each other, meaning that in that sense, if that is the case, they do lack interoperability. And I think it's only logical that if I want to see this space develop and kind of move on, I think having interoperability is key because let's just use a real life example when it comes to this. Let's say I'm using AT&T and I'm just making this scenario as a make-believe to kind of explain this. But again, even besides that, let's say I'm using AT&T, but then I can't call my friend who's using T-Mobile just because I'm using a different carrier. Wouldn't that be kind of like an issue? Now, of course, again, that doesn't exist, but I'm saying, imagine if it did. And again, in the space that we're in as of right now, it's still kind of an issue. So then interoperability, I think, is key because lacking interoperability, quite frankly, I don't think is such a good thing. Now, let's not forget as well. If we take a look at, again, Quant Fusion, built on Quant's interoperability first technology stack of Overledger and foundational patents which were proven through a decade of real-world regulated deployments. Now, again, if someone is familiar with Quant and the Quant network, I think when I say Overledger, I think they're going to think, wow, that's very amazing because let's just take a look at the Quant network in general. It's made up of the Overledger OS and the Overledger network. Let me explain the Overledger OS first because the special thing about it is that through the Overledger OS, something called a multi-chain application can be built. Now, what is that, right? It's basically an application that is built on top of multiple blockchains instead of just one. Now, the advantage, I think, is kind of logical in a sense because imagine if I'm a developer and I'm only building on one blockchain, sure, that blockchain may hypothetically be good, but let's say it may also have some disadvantages because there's quite essentially no perfect blockchain. At least that's the way to take a look at it. However, through the Overledger OS, again, people don't have to be stuck building only just one blockchain. Imagine, let's say, I can build an application that takes advantage of the speed of the Stellar blockchain, while at the same time taking advantage of the strength of the Bitcoin blockchain, or should I say the security. Wouldn't that be amazing? That's just my point of view. Now, allegedly, that can be done through the Overledger OS. So I do like that. Again, I think multi-chain applications moving forward could maybe be the way to go. It doesn't have the best adoption, I'll give it that, but I like the concept, I like the idea. Now that I've talked about the Overledger OS, I want to talk about the Overledger network, which is made up of the Overledger OS users. So again, it's a little bit more simple, but the way to take a look at it is that the Overledger OS is what I'm focused on. And again, when I hear just Overledger mentioned, it does excite me. That's the way to take a look at it. Now, we also have to take a look at when it comes to Quant Fusion, allegedly, it interoperates and accelerates public and permission blockchains securely and compliantly, making blockchains ready for enterprise-grade demand. Why is this amazing? It's because I think having compliance does matter. I mean, we take a look at other projects out there like Zebic, which is really heavily focused on compliance. They recently even acquired something called GateKnox to be somewhat focused on compliance, or should I say more so, right? At least that's the way to take a look at it. Zebic is another project I'm bullish on, but even besides that, we're beginning to see some projects out there kind of have this focus on compliance. So when I see that when it comes to this does also excite me because I think, if anything, they're thinking about the future, or should I say the long term. Not to mention, there was a mention of blockchains ready for enterprise-grade demand. Again, just like I mentioned before. Why is this a big deal? It's because I think enterprise adoption is the way to go moving forward, at least in my opinion, because if we take a look at the internet, historically speaking, what fostered the growth of the internet? I would say it's enterprise adoption because, sure, the retail market did help, but take a look at when enterprises really started adopting the internet in a massive scale. Take a look at the growth it experienced, right? So when it comes to, let's say, these blockchains or these networks or whatever, I would kind of feel like, hey, you know what? Would history repeat itself? Who knows? But I just kind of feel that also enterprises, they typically have the capital, they have the volume, and they have the resources to kind of facilitate that sort of growth. So when I take a look at Quant, I'm very excited for its future because I think it is this type of project that does not really care too much about hype or like attention. What it cares about is building and developing and just kind of moving forward in a sense. I think it's actually a serious project. I don't think it's being taken as a joke, at least I don't. So I do like it when I see stuff like this. So why wouldn't I think this is good news? At least in theory. This is just my opinion. Now let's not forget, right? When it comes to something like Quant, people like to say, oh man, it's kind of doing nothing and all this. Again, having good fundamentals, having stuff like this doesn't necessarily mean that when it comes to the price, it's suddenly going to do this or do that. Because if, let's say, altcoins aren't doing the best, let's say the markets aren't doing the best when it comes to just, these alts and whatnot, right? It's not like this type of stuff is really going to kind of showcase itself immediately. However, during a fully fledged type of bull run, that's a totally different story. So I just kind of feel like Quant is really kind of building right now. So then eventually, if let's say the markets do become better, I think stuff like this will really gain the attention and kind of showcase that, you know what, this is a big deal and Quant is actually doing things that, are improving itself, right? It's not some random project. So yes, the attention may not be too massive for this as of right now, but if let's say the markets do better, I actually think that this could, be viewed as very good. I still view it as very good right now, but however, many people may not view it that way because they take a look at the price of Quant and they're like, oh man, it's not doing the best and all this, even though there's a, pretty good recovery in the grand scheme of things ever since the pullback, but still, there are still ways to go when it comes to Quant. But again, this type of stuff right here, I think is actually so amazing, but then it's not really viewed as in that regard, especially as of right now, because the markets aren't doing the best when it comes to altcoins. But again, in my opinion, I actually do really like this because I am a fan of Quant. Now, let's say Quant were to go to the price of $2,000, considering current circulating supply, market cap at that point would be around $24 billion, which is around an 18x from here. Again, this seemed a little bit, kind of outlandish not too long ago. And again, I just don't think this market cap is that ridiculous. I mean, take a look at Dogecoin, which pretty much exceeded this by give or take around 4 times back in 2021. I mean, Dogecoin reached over $80 billion in market cap that year. So is this like too much to ask for? Now, there is no way to tell the future, at least I cannot. But then the way to take a look at it is that it doesn't seem that ridiculous to me. However, no matter what I do, or no matter, let's say I pull up a price chart, draw some random triangle, or no matter what, I think about Quant, the market's not going to care. So why would I focus on things that are beyond my control? What I'm going to do is stay patient, accumulate my favorite projects, hold, and I just wait. Literally, that's it. I'm not going to do anything out of that, in a sense that I'm going to stick with my strategy because that's what I do. I know some people may think it's a little bit boring, but it is what it is because I just don't want to stress myself out and worry about things that are beyond my control. Instead, I'd rather just, control myself and just, again, not pay attention to things that I cannot have any control over. It's like, for instance, some people are saying, oh, when is this exactly going to do this or do that? I mean, there's no way to tell, for sure, at least I cannot. Sure, I can take a look back in history and see how usually altcoins, as a worst-case scenario, typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event, which, based on the last one, which happened in April of last year, would actually mean around October this year. But again, that's based off history. There's no way to tell this time around if that will be the case. So, again, I'm just going to stay patient because it's a waiting game for me, but I'm very excited when it comes to Quant, and I like seeing news when it comes to Quant Fusion, and I'm very enthusiastic as to what it could very well showcase moving forward. Only time will tell, but I still like the idea and I like the concept. And again, I like seeing stuff like this. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I would greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.